Cops of Reddit, what is the most what the fuck happened here moment you've experienced? I've never been a cop, but my dad was for several years and I've heard plenty of stories from him. The one that I think fits this thread best came from early in his career when he was still pretty much a rookie. He and some of the other cops got called to a house to follow up on an old woman who was suspected to be dead. When they get there, they find out the woman was a big-time hoarder with stuff stacked to the ceilings and paths leading to each room barely big enough for one person. While my dad is walking around taking all this in, one of the other officers suddenly puts his hand out and tells my dad to stop right where he was. Dad asked why and the officer said, "You almost stepped on her." My dad looked down to find the old woman dead and buried under her own stuff. Former cop was a rookie deputy and got this call that a man got his foot caught in a garden tiller and was bleeding profusely. It was a 20-minute drive running code, so I had time to plan out my actions. I figured the ambulance would be about 10 minutes behind me, so I was gonna tourniquet above the knee and I assumed he'd be unconscious and or needing CPR. I get there and it's a big ass farm building with two guys just standing there smoking. I grabbed my medic bag, not a medic but it a tourniquet, C-collar, gauze, etc. I run towards them to ask where the patient was and they were white as a ghost just smoking while pointing behind them. I went inside and behind a big John Deere tractor was a huge PTO-driven tiller about 7 feet wide and 3 feet tall. There was my victim, with his back against the tractor tire, his left leg was sucked in the tiller and wrapped twice around it with the sole of the shoe next to his face and toe pointing towards the left. His femur shot out underneath the tiller and was beautifully white with no blood. He looked up at me and said, "Can you help me?" Now keep in mind, I'm 21, thought this was a garden tiller and assumed I'd be able to do something, but I was completely out of my element. 2 ambulances, the rural fire department extrication team, a welding company to cut the machine apart on scene, a helicopter and a surgeon that came to amputate on scene later. He was free. I'm taking a slightly different approach in answering this question. A couple of months ago, I got a QA, questionable activity call. It's a catch-all for anything suspicious. The caller stated she believed someone had snuck into her backyard, climbed up onto her second floor deck and then left an imprint of their dick on her sliding door. I show up to the call about 5 minutes later and she's mad at me because I didn't schedule an appointment to come over and her kids saw me. She didn't want her kids to think something bad had happened. After we get past her anger towards me for showing up, she shows me the glass sliding door in question. In all fairness to the caller, there was a sizable smudge and imprint on the glass. However, the imprint looked nothing like any penis I've ever seen. In fact, the imprint looked really similar to the dead bird laying on the deck next to the door. When I pointed out the dead bird and explained my belief that no dick had been placed on her door, the caller became incredibly irate and told me she moved to our city because it was supposed to be very safe, but now she was thinking of moving away because naked people throwing dead birds at her house was more than she could handle. Realizing I would not be able to rationalize with Dick Bird, I left and wrote my report. Some people don't deserve to call 911. Edit, thanks for the silver. Edit 2, thanks for the gold. Late to the party, but my favorite so far has got to be the tale of the UFO/aliens. I was a cop on the res for a while and had my fair share of crazies. One night, I'm out driving around and I get a call from dispatch. There's a UFO out in one of the farmers' fields. Okay, so I get to the house and talk with the guy. We know each other, he doesn't seem to be that loony. I turn my spotlight onto said field and sure as shit, there's something not quite right there. It's metal and shit. So I go bebopping through the furrows and hoping my scardiness isn't showing because this is freaky. It was an autumn night with the wind howling and clouds blowing overhead. I get closer. I have one hand on my holstered gun and the other shining my flashlight. I was rehearsing what I was going to say to our new overlords and then my brain finally clicks as to what the fuck it actually was. A wad of those stupid mylar balloons. All blown up and caught on some weeds. I'm talking like 20 of those fuckers, just chilling and scaring the shit out of me. I grabbed them and walked back out to the farmer. He started laughing and then I did too. I handed them over to him and got back in my squad, still shaking. The sad part was, he passes away a few years ago, and his family gave me those deflated balloons that he had kept. I have them in my basement now. Not a cop, but have a story. So a couple of years ago, I was in a fender bender. I'm driving down our small town main road, late at night, on the way home. Small town, so to keep noise down at night, all the traffic lights along the main road are set to green as default, and red to the sides, so that big trucks don't have to stop and use their noisy brakes. I'm tired after a long drive, so I'm cruising at speed limit, green lights all the way for me, when out of nowhere a car suddenly comes screaming into the intersection ahead of me, leaving me with no time to even react. I T-bone them at an angle as they're entering the main road at quite a speed, and ricochet off. My car spins around twice on the slightly damp road before coming to a stop without hitting anything else. The other car doesn't even slow down, and keeps driving on, leaving me sitting there feeling like I'm that random innocent car that always gets wrecked in a movie when the villain makes his escape. Skip ahead until the authorities arrive. Cop gets out of his car, sees only my car that's almost wrecked, and absolutely no damage to anything, anywhere else. He looks me up and down, sees blood rushing down my face from a head gash from destroying my rearview mirror and goes, "What the fuck happened? What the hell did you hit?" Some questioning later, while the medics are putting a bandage around my head, the other car arrives, with only minor damage. The cop must have seen the relief on my face as the other driver walked over and explained that his wife was going into labor, and he had to get her to the hospital. While we were busy at the scene, she gave birth to a beautiful healthy baby girl with no complications. He then left quickly to come and explain, and he even showed us pictures of his newborn on his phone. I didn't press charges and his insurance paid for fixing my car and my medical bills. The WTF on that cop's face was epic though. One time we got a call about a minor wreck in a highway corridor. We get there, I'm handling the accident. 100 yards down there is a car on flats, and another further down from that, unrelated to the accident. One of the drivers walked back to us and told us a sketchy guy had been stopping at these cars to offer his help in fixing the flats. The theory was that he threw something on the road to flatten the tires so that he could help and get money from the drivers. I'm stuck at the back end of this mess, on the radio trying to get another unit to detain the shady guy. All of a sudden I look over and there's a guy in nothing but a hospital gown and an M4 hanging out of his arm just tootling along the shoulder. The nearest hospital was several miles away, so I have no idea how he covered that distance with nobody noticing. So here I am with 1, a car wreck, 2, guy possibly flattening tires on purpose, and 3, an escaped hospital patient. All completely unrelated, on a major highway late at night. A friend of mine is a cop in the UK and his story is more WTF as he saw it unfold, but missed how it all started. It was his first week out on patrol and he was assigned to an experienced partner. They respond to a burglary in progress and are told that a nearby dog unit was on the scene already. When they arrive at the property they hear a commotion outside that's clearly between an officer and a suspect, and they open the garden gate to assist the dog unit. What they then witness is a suspect face down on the grass, an officer stamping on the suspect's back whilst holding his arm up near her hip and shouting "Stop resisting," and the police dog absolutely going to town on this guy's buttocks with his teeth. Suspect is, unsurprisingly, struggling and resisting and then ends up kicking the dog. The dog then latches onto the guy's leg, starts ferociously tugging, pulls sighty off and then runs towards the new cops on the scene with it. It turns out that was a false leg, which no one except the suspect knew at the time, and my buddy the cop said he just froze whilst trying to figure out how the hell he calls this in and whether or not he should retrieve the man's leg from the police dog. Show up to a trouble unknown call. Teenage looking girl walks out the front door as I arrive, and sits on a chair in the front listening to an iPod. This was pretty disarming for me. She was clearly not distressed at all from whatever the trouble unknown was. I didn't even disturb her as I knocked on the front door. I can see an adult male through the side glass by the door. He has a look of absolute terror. As he reaches the door, a crazed looking woman attacks him from behind, biting his shoulder like a zombie. I would later learn this is his wife. Holy shit. Dispatch, give me the channel and get me more officers here now. I open the door and the fight is on. Pull this woman off and wrestle her to the ground, face down. She's very small framed, probably 5 and 100 pounds max. I'm a foot taller and 80 pounds heavier. She's screaming and flailing. I grab hold of her right arm, attempting to put it behind her back for handcuffing, but she is supernaturally strong for some reason. I've got both hands on her right wrist now trying to control her and she's not giving at all. I try pain compliance, muscle gouges, anything to give me an advantage. No response, still fighting. It felt like this was going on for a long time, but in reality it was a few minutes. Finally backup arrives, and he immediately goes to grab her left arm, seeing what I'm trying to accomplish. I'm finally able to get a handcuff on her wrist and pin it to her back, and my partner cuffs the other wrist, but she slips out, small frame, small hands/wrist. This happened a few times in a row, and finally out of frustration I yelled, just clamp the fucking cuff all the way down, we'll adjust it when she's under control. Finally get her cuffed, but she's still flailing and screaming. Other officers arrive at this point as well as paramedics. They're unable to assess her at all really. The husband tells us they bought some cheap weed from a sketchy dude in town and after smoking it she flipped out. I assume it was laced with something. He said he smoked too but didn't have a reaction, so who knows. We had to drive this lady up to the hospital in a patrol car. She calmed down a little, but the entire ride she was rambling about nonsense. The hospital was prepared and had several large nurses waiting, and we got her strapped down to a bed. I told the staff about the weed and said good luck. When my adrenaline was gone, my forearms were so sore, they felt like rocks from fighting with this tiny woman. Moral of the story, don't smoke shit you bought from the town crackhead. I found 3 kids one day running next to a busy highway. The oldest was 5. We finally got them identified and figured out they lived about a mile away. We got there. They were in the care of their adult, 20-ish, sister while their parents were on vacation for 2 weeks. The sister decided she'd rather pop Xanax and smoke weed than deal with the kids, so she locked them in their bedroom for about 10 days, occasionally sliding food and water past the door. There were piss stains on the baseboards in the bedroom from where the kids had decided their bathroom should be. Finally the 5-year-old had enough and figured out how to unlock the bedroom window and make a break for it. That's nowhere near the darkest stuff I've seen. Don't like to talk about it. Edit, sorry folks, I work nights and just woke up. She went to jail for endangering a child, and as far as I know the case is still pending. The kids were seized by CPS and held by a foster family overnight until their parents could drive home. Might not really fit here as I'm not a cop, but still a WTF. As a brand new ER nurse, we had 2 police officers drop off a naked man bleeding from his groin area. We were informed he was not in custody, but they would be in the waiting room to arrest him when he was discharged. The city would have had to pay for his care if he was under arrest. The man refused to say anything without his lawyer, so all I knew was the chief complaint: cut on scrotum. I take off the towel and get to see my first testicle, as in without the normal fleshy covering. Way the skin was ripped, I thought for sure a police dog was involved. I'll spare you the rest of the gory details. Someone manages to get the backstory out of the cops. Dude was in the shower when they arrived to arrest him on a meth charge. He runs and tries to hop over a chain link fence. Not nearly as exciting as I was thinking. My dad told me the one time he went to a house and a woman pulled something out of her shopping bag and started hitting him with it. He's trying to stop her, but the other officers are all laughing. Finally he realizes that she's beating him with a dildo. My dad is loving that so many people upvoted his story. I used to be a cop. We got a call from a guy who claimed to be the victim of a robbery and was incapacitated in his home and had only just managed to reach his phone and call us. We arrived to a trailer home that was totally empty except for a man in hardcore fetish gear tied to some sort of sex swing. I mean, there was nothing else in this house except the gimp tied to the sex swing. Nothing, no furniture, not even curtains. Okay dude, what the fuck? Sex gimp? Well, you see, officer, I hired 2 Asian hookers to spank me while I was in the swing. Nothing illegal there, no sexual acts, just some spanking and they'd leave. Well, the girls arrived, tied me to the swing, then, 2 Asian guys showed up, beat the living shit out of me, then pulled up our trailer and stole literally everything that I owned before leaving me hanging here with my cell phone because they said they knew nobody would believe my story anyways, but the cops would probably chase them for a murder. I still don't know if I believe his story, but never found any evidence to suggest that he was lying either. I just didn't find anything at all. In high school I took a criminology course as an elective, and our teacher was a retired officer. When we asked him for his weirdest story, he told us about a repeat offender. The offender was a homeless, homosexual gentleman that had a penchant for exhibitionism. He said he got a call out for someone exposing themselves in public, and when he arrived on scene, he found said gentleman with his ankles to sky, naked as the day he was born, with a half-empty bag of avocados and a can of Crisco. After taking him to the station, they found the other half of the avocados strewn about the back of their cruiser. Too many to choose from, I forget them all. Are in a pond. Guy bought the car, hated it, got so angry he literally drove it into a pond and they left. Ticket for littering cause. I jumped in to see if anyone was in the car. Car wrecked in a tree. In a tree, like up in the middle of the branches. I just don't know how. Half missing, decomposing dead body from natural death. Turned out the many cats in the house ate half that person. Okay, that one's gross. A ride-along had a warrant and got tased by the officer they were with, trying to run from. That was a more of WTF moment hearing it over the radio. Guy going through a divorce and decided to renovate his house at 2 AM with a sledgehammer, by taking out all the walls and furniture, cause his future ex got awarded the house. Didn't arrest him, was still his house. Just keep the noise down please. I was a passerby during a public argument between 2 strangers. I passed by before the police rolled in. I witnessed a foreigner trying to fight with a Greek vendor. They started throwing each other around. People step in to separate them but they won't let each other go. One guy loses his pants and underwear. The other guy is trying to swing at his balls. A young girl rushes in with a chair and breaks it against the head of one of the randoms who tried to separate them. An older grandma throws her shoes at the girl. The guy who got hit by a chair throws the shoes back at the grandma who gets hit square on the face. The younger girl takes her shoe off and smacks his head again, while the grandma runs over pulling the girl's hair. The guy finally gets a grip on the other guy's penis while one other guy who is separating them is biting on his head trying to get him to let go. All the while a woman is screaming from the balcony above them, "You thief, stealing balls from children. Thief, I saw you. Give back the balls to the children." Yay. I'd Kai the man. Edit, damn first ever award. I'd like to thank my mom, my dad, the wonderful silver giver and of course the Greek vendor and butt-naked guy for making all this possible. This one happened to my friend, first day on the job. He's driving with his partner. Normally we don't have partners but for the first 6 months when you start you are paired up. Also, we have community volunteers which are like unarmed but trained individuals who assist the peace officer. So 3 people total. He's driving down a highway when he sees a man on the side of the road near an entrance to an access road for a cottage. Man is naked and covered in blood and pointing down the access road, trying to get their attention. Turn on lights and go down road. The man is signaling them and when they pull over he just leaps into a woods and starts running alongside the road. They follow. They get to a cottage and the door is open. They turn to look at the naked man and he's gone. Vanished into the woods. There is also visibly blood all over the door and deck. Supervisor gets out, goes into the trunk, gets the shotgun and gives it to the unarmed auxiliary saying something like, "Cover out back and try not to shoot us, we are going in." He and my friend draw their pistols and go. When they get inside there is blood everywhere. Like from a movie, all over the walls, furniture, just everywhere. Enter the living room. There is a man on the couch with a couple knife wounds to his stomach but is alert and seems actually not that bad. But he's holding a pit bull on a leash. "If you let that dog go it's dead," says supervisor. Guy ties leash to side of couch. Puts his hands up, but won't say a word. "Is there anyone here? What happened? Are you okay?" nothing, he's not answering. They place him under arrest and auxiliary takes him to the car. They continue searching upstairs, clearing rooms out until they get to one of the bedrooms. Look in and there is a guy under some covers but still obviously awake. Show me your hands. The guy hears them, throws the blanket off to reveal he is also naked, stabbed, and basically about to die from blood loss. Paramedics come, house is fully cleared out. As it turns out, the three guys, including Naked Forest Man, were all drug dealers just having a get-together. They started doing ecstasy and after getting really high turned into a bit of a gay orgy. In a moment of lucidity, one of the drug dealers realized he wasn't gay and grabbed a knife, which escalated into a gay orgy knife fight, hence all the blood. That was day one. Not me, but my dad's a cop. They went in an apartment to get a dead man and had to check his ID card. It said he was a Caucasian expat from the UK, so they were confused as to why the body that they found was that of a black man's. As it turns out, his body had just turned entirely black because he'd been dead for so long. The newbie that they made retrieve the body vomited and fainted, but apparently newbies are made to retrieve the body, so he had to do it in the end. I'm not a cop, but a friend who has told me about a call from an apartment building where the tenants were complaining about a smell coming from one of the apartments. When they went in, they found the bathtub full of fecal matter. Turns out the occupant had a scat fetish. His parents had money and had to hire a crime scene cleanup crew from 100 miles away to come clean it up. He had never before that day heard of a scat fetish. Come to think of it, I don't think I had either. Not a cop, but my parents were officers who would sometimes tell me things. One night in the jail, an inmate was on the floor unresponsive. The officers and nurse come in to give him chest compressions or whatever, and the dude is just dead. Turns out he broke off the temple piece off his eyeglasses and somehow managed to wedge it into his chest. So while they were giving him chest compressions, they were actually just shoving that piece of his eyeglasses more and more around in his chest. What a creative suicide. EMT, but I got to jump in on this one. We responded to a call at a Motel 6 near Washington, D.C. We get to the room and this dude in tighty whities is screaming incoherently. We go inside, and there is a dude about 250 pounds, butt naked, covered in baby oil, that was completely unresponsive on a tarp on the ground. We try to get him on the stretcher, but he keeps sliding off. We use the sheets and even curtains to try to get the oil off him, to no avail. We eventually have to call the fire department to help us get him up, and even when we get him on the stretcher, he slides right off. Eventually, we get him strapped in, and take him to the hospital. He passed away without ever regaining consciousness. Apparently what happened was this married father of three flew to DC to meet his internet boyfriend. One of their kinks was the dude taking Ambien and letting the other guy face fuck him. Doctors suspect that the Ambien caused his epiglottis to relax, and baby oil got into his lungs, where it blocked his alveolar. I'm still curious how notifying the family went on that one. To be honest here, the majority of WTF happened here cases are usually the most gruesome and traumatic, which might explain why the thread hasn't taken off like you had hoped. My partner and I are both police officers with the military, so our experiences are somewhat different. I retired from the force this year. But thinking back on all the memorable cases we have had, the most WTF happened cases were all suicide and death related. The misadventure deaths usually take the cake for complete WTF worthiness though. One involved a guy who was found hanged in his bedroom. He was wearing a dress and heels, with strings attached from his feet to his ball sack. We believe that he liked the tugging sensation when he walked around the room. There were numerous scum jars, many without lids, all over his bedroom. Some of them had been knocked over. It was just a complete mess. The only thing that comes to mind at the scene is WTF. Obligatory, not a cop, but an acquaintance. She was once called by this guy who complained that the prostitute he paid wasn't willing to sleep with him. Prostitution is legal here, BTW. So she asks the prostitute about it and she said, well, I would sleep with him, but he is so drunk that he can't get it up. It must be hard not to start laughing in the guy's face right then and there. I could give you tons of stories from over the years, but for whatever reason, the one that came to mind when I read this post title was, "We deal with this one particular couple, M+F, a lot. They are for sure frequent callers, and they call in some craziness every time. Weird medicals, weird allegations of kidnappings, suspicious sightings, all kinds of shit. Almost none of it has actually happened, and it seems like the calls generally come in the morning hours after they have long nights of drug use. Anyway, one time we got to their place to deal with their call for that day, and we ended up walking into their bedroom while talking to them. The walls in their bedroom were huge floor-to-ceiling mirrors. There were webcams everywhere, and written in huge lipstick letters on one of the walls, with a live webcam pointed at it, was Big Pussy Challenge Tuesday 10 p.m. That announcement apparently had nothing to do with the call we were on, but there were adult diapers all over the floor, and those were part of the call. Every time we go to their place, we leave going _O. Not a cop, but worked as a park ranger. Came up on a scene with blood everywhere, hoofs sticking up out of a styrofoam cooler, a truck bed full of blood, beer cans everywhere, and an antelope head on the picnic table. Perfect welcome to a campground full of children. It's more of what an old friend told our family. They see a lot of fucked up things. I'll tell you the two that I remember the most. In order for the pay downs/body searches to happen, a medic, or nurse, has to do it. Don't know why, but it's just one of those laws that probably protects the people being searched. A hooker came into the station. They did the pat down for the hooker, and when they got to between her legs they found a tree car air freshener shoved up her vagina. It wasn't folded to be put up there whatsoever. A reasoning for having up there, you may ask? Her area stunk. Then on a completely different woman, they found a 20-year-old clitoral piercing that was very evident that it hasn't been removed or tended to since skin was formed over it. So we wanted to talk to this guy who had a history of child sex offenses, and had been reported approaching kids in the town center. He was living out of a van which had been in the same spot for a couple months. I'd never seen the van myself, it was just known by others that it was there. Two others went to where he was approaching kids, and two of us went to see if he was in his van. It was an old, rusty, beaten up Pos with windows on the sides and back. Note that this guy definitely lived alone. Front windscreen, bottom half blocked with beer cans, top half blocked with women's underwear draped across the top. Side window, smashed, but smashed outwards. Other side and rear window, smeared with honey on the inside, based on the empty honey jars we could see. Inside, floors completely covered in women's clothing and underwear, and lots of sanitary towels scattered around. Sparkly high heels in a children's size. In the center of it all, two raw pork chops with no packaging just sitting there in the middle of the floor. I can get the beer cans and women's clothing. Presumably an alcoholic with some kind of cross-dressing habit. Not exactly ordinary, but whatever, far from the weirdest thing I've seen. But why was the window smashed outwards? Why the shoes in a child's size? Why the hell would you smear honey on the inside of the window? Why would you have the raw pork chop in the middle of your van? Never did find out the answers to those questions. It all got passed on to a different team. Not sure I want to know given the guy's history, and I don't even want to say what my guesses would be. Not a cop at all, but my grandpa was in the FBI in the 60s 80s and has some interesting stories he's told me. Back in the day there was a wanted man who they had been trying to find for a while. They knew where he lived, but every time they would check to see if he was at his apartment there were never any signs of him. He lived far away from the city in a relatively rural area of Texas. One day my grandpa was off duty and was in the area, I'm not sure why, and decided to check on it, not expecting anything to come of it. The guy wasn't known to be dangerous, so my grandpa didn't think much of going to check on the house. He went up to the door and knocked. The door opened up after a little, and lo and behold, it's the guy they're looking for standing right in front of him with a pistol in his hand. I don't remember exactly what happened since I was told this story a while ago, but he managed to disarm the guy and get him cuffed. The guy didn't resist and later claimed that he was practicing his quick draw. After my grandpa got him into handcuffs, he put the pistol on top of the refrigerator in the room, assuming that the wanted guy was the only person in the apartment. My grandpa started taking the guy out of the apartment to his car. As he was reaching the door, he heard a yell from behind him. His girlfriend had been in the apartment the whole time, and when he turned around she had grabbed the gun from the top of the fridge and demanded that he let the guy go. So instead of letting him go, but Grandpa used the guy as a human shield and told her to put the gun down. She refused, so he approached her with her boyfriend in between them for protection. He got close enough to throw the boyfriend into her and subsequently cuffed her too. The whole time the wanted guy was pleading with the girlfriend to stop and didn't struggle against my grandpa. My grandpa only took the wanted guy because they were far from the city. I don't remember if he went back for the girlfriend later or if he got back up to do it. So Dr. My grandpa used a human shield when in the FBI. Not a cop. Used to work security for a hospital. Cops brought in this drunk girl, said she was pretty touchy and for us men to be aware and watch our junk. Got a call on our phone to report to the room. Chick was stripped fully nude, rubbing herself in her own shit while claiming that her husband was the king of Maui and her daughter's suicide was a cover-up and she was actually killed by the mob. I am 65% sure I muttered the fuck when I initially got to the room.